Rain drummed against the cracked pavement as David Reed huddled deeper into his thin jacket. The alley smelled like rotting garbage and engine grease, but at least the overhang kept most of the water off him. He pulled out his credit chip and stared at the faint glow showing his remaining balance. 43 credits. Not enough for rent. Not enough for transport passes. Barely enough for one decent meal. His stomach twisted with familiar hunger. 3 weeks since the cargo company laid him off. 3 weeks of watching his savings drain away like water through his fingers. Tomorrow he had an interview at the recycling plant across town. If he saved these credits for the transport fare, he could get there. If he spent them on food tonight, he would have energy for the interview but no way to reach it. David closed his eyes and made his decision. One meal. He would walk to the interview tomorrow even if it took 4 hours. Right now his hands were shaking too much from hunger to think straight. He pushed himself up and headed toward the street where a food vendor usually parked his cart. The quickest route cut through the warehouse district, past the old shipping containers that nobody used anymore. David knew these alleys well after 3 weeks of avoiding his landlord and searching for day work that never appeared. Halfway through the maze of containers, David heard something. A wet, rasping sound. Like breathing, but wrong. Too deep, too slow. He should have kept walking. Smart people in bad situations did not investigate strange noises. But something in that sound spoke of suffering, and David had spent enough nights hungry and cold to recognize pain when he heard it. He found the dragon behind a rusted container, collapsed in a puddle of oily water. David froze. He had seen dragons before, of course. Everyone had, at least on the news feeds. They worked as guards for wealthy merchants or flew patrol routes for corporate security. Powerful creatures, expensive to hire, dangerous to approach. But this dragon looked nothing like those sleek, gleaming beasts. This one lay broken in the trash, scales dull and cracked like old leather. Its breathing came in shallow gasps and its eyes were closed. It was dying. David knew that look. He had seen it in his grandfather's eyes in those final days at the charity hospital. The smart choice was to walk away. Dragons were not his problem. He had his own survival to worry about. 43 credits would buy 1 meal, not 2. If he helped this creature, he would go hungry tonight. Tomorrow's interview would be that much harder on an empty stomach. David stood there in the rain watching the dragon's labored breathing. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, words she had spoken at his grandfather's funeral. Measure a person by what they do when nobody's watching. When there's no reward, no recognition, no benefit to themselves. That's when you see who someone really is. Nobody was watching. Nobody would ever know if David walked away right now. The dragon would die and the universe would keep spinning. And David would have his meal and his transport fare and maybe, finally, a job tomorrow. He turned toward the street and made it 3 steps before he stopped. David cursed under his breath, then walked back to the dragon. He knelt in the oily water, ignoring the cold seeping through his pants. The dragon's eye cracked open, a dim golden slit in the gloom. It made a sound low and warning, trying to bare its teeth, trying to be dangerous even while dying. Easy, David said softly. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm going to get you some food, okay? Just hang on. The eye widened slightly, confusion replacing the warning. Then it closed again, as if the effort of staying conscious was too much. David ran to the food vendor, his last 43 credits clutched in his fist. He bought a container of protein noodles and synthetic meat, the kind of meal that would fill a stomach and provide actual nutrition. The vendor barely looked at him as he handed over the steaming container. Back in the alley, David knelt beside the dragon again. The creature was still breathing, but barely. David opened the container, letting the smell of hot food drift over them both. His own stomach cramped painfully at the scent. Hey, David said, touching the dragon's shoulder carefully. Food you need to eat. The golden eye opened again. The dragon stared at the container, then at David, then back at the container. Something like disbelief flickered across its ancient face. Come on, David urged. I know you can smell it. When's the last time you ate? The dragon moved slowly, painfully, raising its head just enough. David held out a portion of the noodles and meat. The dragon took it carefully, almost gently, as if afraid David would snatch it away. It chewed slowly, swallowed, and a tremor ran through its body. David kept feeding it piece by piece, giving the dragon most of the container. He took small bites for himself, just enough to stop the worst of the shaking in his hands. The dragon deserved more. It was bigger, sicker, weaker. David could survive one more hungry night. He had done it before. "My name is David," he said between bites. "What's yours?" The dragon was quiet for a long moment, chewing carefully. Then it spoke, its voice rough and ancient. "Ashkara." "Nice to meet you, Ashkara." David offered the last portion of meat. "I'm sorry it's not more." Ashkara took the final piece and swallowed it. Those golden eyes fixed on David with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. The dragon was looking at him like it could see straight through to his bones, reading something written there that David himself could not see. "Why?" Ashkara asked finally. The single word carried weight, centuries of it. David shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "You were hungry. I had food. What else would I do?" Something changed in Ashkara's eyes. The dim gold brightened just a fraction. The dragon lowered its head, the closest thing to a bow that its weakened state could manage. "I will not forget this," Ashkara said quietly. "I promise you, David Reed, I will not forget." David nodded, not really understanding, but accepting it anyway. He stood up, his knees wet and cold, his stomach still half empty. "I'll try to come back tomorrow. If I can find work, I'll bring more food." He left Ashkara there in the alley and walked back toward the street. The interview tomorrow suddenly seemed less important. He would find a way to get there even if he had to walk. He had made a promise, and David kept his promises. Behind him, in the shadows of the alley, Ashkara watched him go. The dragon's eyes blazed suddenly bright, golden fire kindling in their depths. Scales that had been cracked and dull began to shimmer faintly, and Ashkara took a deeper breath than it had managed in 100 years. In the darkness across the street, a sleek figure stood beneath an awning. Ambassador Lisa of the Kathen species raised a communication device to her lips, her expression unreadable. "Notify the Conquered Council," she said quietly. "We have a situation. A human just fed the sovereign of the Western Reaches. The old bonds may be awakening." She watched David disappear into the rain, then looked back at the alley where golden light was beginning to glow. After 3,000 years, something impossible had just happened, and Lissa had witnessed it. David woke with his back aching and his stomach growling. He had slept in the doorway of an abandoned shop, curled up with his jacket pulled tight against the cold. The morning sun cut through the clouds in pale strips, and somewhere nearby a transport horn blared. The interview. David checked the time on a public display across the street. 8 in the morning. The recycling plant interview was at 10, and it would take him nearly 3 hours to walk there. He had no credits left for transport. Every step of the journey would be on foot, but first he had made a promise. David stopped at a public water station and filled an old bottle he had been carrying. Then he walked to a convenience store and stood outside for 5 minutes, watching the clerk through the window. When the clerk turned to help another customer, David slipped inside and grabbed a single nutrition bar from the discount bin. He was out the door before anyone noticed, his heart pounding with shame. David Reed had never stolen anything in his life, but Ashkara needed food, and David had no other way to provide it. The alley looked different in daylight. Less threatening, but somehow sadder. David could see the rust on the containers more clearly, the trash scattered across the pavement, the stains on the walls. He rounded the corner where he had left Ashkara last night, already preparing himself for the worst. Dragons could die quickly when they were that far gone. Instead, he found Ashkara standing. The dragon was not just alive. It was transformed. Scales that had been cracked and dull now shimmered with deep crimson and gold, catching the morning light like polished metal. The creature stood tall, easily 3 times David's height, with its head raised and its eyes blazing with inner fire. When it saw David, those golden eyes fixed on him with startling intensity. "You came back," Ashkara said, and its voice no longer rasped. It rang clear and strong, echoing off the alley walls. David held up the water bottle and the stolen nutrition bar, feeling suddenly foolish. "I brought what I could. It's not much." Ashkara lowered its massive head until it was level with David's face. This close, David could feel heat radiating from the dragon's scales, could see the intelligence burning in those ancient eyes. "You fed me when you were starving," Ashkara said quietly. "You gave me your last meal expecting nothing in return. Do you understand what you did?" David shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of the dragon's stare. "You were dying. I had food. That's all. That is everything," Ashkara corrected. "The curse that held me was bound by the conquered of eternal stars 3,000 years ago." It drained my life force slowly, year by year, until I was reduced to what you found last night. The curse could only be broken by one thing, an act of pure compassion, selfless with no expectation of reward. In 3,000 years, hundreds of beings passed me in that alley. None of them helped. Until you. David stared at the dragon, trying to process this. The Conquered did this to you? Why? Because I refused to be their weapon, Ashkara said, straightening to full height again. We dragons are powerful, David. Too powerful for the Conquered to control through normal means. So they gave us a choice. Serve them or face the curse. I chose freedom over servitude. I chose slow death over surrender. A whining sound cut through the air. David looked up to see 3 security drones descending into the alley, their scanners glowing red. Behind them came a sleek transport, landing smoothly on the pavement and blocking the alley's exit. The transport door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall and elegant with blue-green skin and silver eyes that marked her as Cathen. She wore the formal robes of a Concord ambassador, and a squad of armed guards flanked her on both sides. Sovereign Ashkara, the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Ambassador Lysa. By the authority of the Concord of Eternal Stars, I demand your immediate surrender. You will be transported to Concord Central for evaluation and processing. Ashkara's eyes narrowed. The old agreements are void, Ambassador. The Concord betrayed its promises when it cursed me. I owe your government nothing. Lysa's expression hardened. Then you will be taken by force. Your resistance will be noted in the official record. The guards raised their weapons, energy rifles humming as they powered up. David saw the barrels swing toward Ashkara, saw the dragon tense to spring or flee. Without thinking, David stepped between them. Wait, David said, his voice cracking slightly. Just wait a second. Lysa's silver eyes shifted to him, and David saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or disgust. Step aside, human. This does not concern you. Yes, it does, David said, though his legs were shaking. Ashkara is my friend. You can't just take it. One of the guards laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. Your friend? Humans do not have dragon friends. You are a useful, primitive species at best. This dragon is Conquered property, and you are interfering with official business. David felt heat rising in his chest. Not anger, exactly. Something deeper. Ashkara is not property, and I may be primitive by your standards, but I know right from wrong. This is wrong. Lysa studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. She looked almost sad. You have no idea what you are defending, human. This dragon is dangerous. It could kill you with a thought. Then I would be dead already, David replied. Ashkara has had plenty of chances to hurt me. Instead, it thanked me for a meal and promised to remember. That sounds like a person, not a weapon. Behind him, Ashkara made a low sound. Not a growl. Something else. When David glanced back, the dragon was staring at him with those blazing golden eyes, and there was something in them that looked almost like wonder. Ashkara stepped forward, placing itself beside David rather than behind him. The dragon spoke, and its voice rang with power that made the alley walls vibrate. This human showed me more honor in one hungry night than your Concord has shown in 3,000 years. I name him Flame Brother, bound by the first laws. His enemies are mine. His struggles are mine. His loyalty has earned mine in return. The guard stepped back. Lysa went pale, her silver eyes widening. You cannot, she whispered. The Flame Brother bond has not been invoked in millennia. You are declaring war on the Concord itself. I am declaring that this human stands under my protection, Ashkara corrected. What the Conquered chooses to do with that information is their decision. But know this, Ambassador. If you harm David Reed, you will answer to me. And I am no longer dying in an alley. The dragon's scales blazed suddenly bright, heat rippling the air around them. The guards raised their weapons higher, but Lysa held up one hand, stopping them. This changes everything, Lysa said softly. She looked at David, and there was something in her expression that might have been pity. You have made a powerful ally, human. You have also made powerful enemies. The Concord does not tolerate challenges to its authority. She turned and walked back to her transport, her guards following. Before the door closed, she looked back one more time. I liked you better when you were ignorant, David Reed. Ignorance is safer. The transport lifted off, the drones following. David and Ashkara stood alone in the alley, morning sun streaming down around them. David's legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the pavement. What just happened? Ashkara settled beside him, heat radiating from its scales like a furnace. You stood between me and an army, David. You defended a friend when it would have been easier and safer to walk away. That is what happened. I'm going to lose my interview, David said and started to laugh. It sounded slightly hysterical. I'm going to lose everything, aren't I? Perhaps, Ashkara admitted. But you will not lose me. That is the meaning of flame, brother. We are bound now, David Reed. Your enemies are mine. Your struggles are mine, and my power is yours to call upon when you need it. David looked up at the dragon towering beside him. I just wanted to help. I didn't ask for any of this. The best bonds are never asked for, Ashkara said gently. They are given freely without expectation. You gave me kindness. Now I give you loyalty. That is how trust begins. In the sky above, more transport ships were appearing. David could see news drones circling, their cameras pointed down at the alley. Whatever had just happened, the whole city was about to know about it. David closed his eyes and tried not to think about how badly he had just complicated his life. He had fed a dying stranger in an alley. That was all. How had such a simple act of kindness turned into this? Ashkara's massive head lowered beside him, golden eyes warm. Do you regret it? David thought about that question. About hunger and cold and loneliness. About seeing suffering and having the power to ease it. About his grandmother's words, about measuring a person by what they do when nobody is watching. No, David said finally. I don't regret it. Good, Ashkara rumbled. Because neither do I. News traveled fast in New Harbor. By noon, every screen in the city showed footage of David Reed standing between a conquered ambassador and an ancient dragon. By evening, his face was everywhere. By the next morning, his life had completely fallen apart. David sat on a bench in the public park watching people avoid him. They saw him, recognized him from the broadcasts, and immediately found somewhere else to be. Mothers pulled their children away. Workers crossed to the other side of the path. Even the homeless man who usually slept on the bench next to his had found a different spot. His landlord had sent an eviction notice that morning. Not the standard 30 days. Immediate eviction citing Weishin Xingwei endangering other tenants. David had returned to his apartment to find his belongings in 3 boxes on the street, and the locks changed. Everything he owned in the world fit in 3 boxes, and he had no place to put them. The recycling plant had sent a message too. Position filled. They were sorry, but they could not hire him at this time. No explanation given, but David knew why. Nobody wanted to employ the human who had defied the conquered. Nobody wanted that kind of attention. His credit account had been flagged for review. His universal ID had been marked with a warning status. Even basic services were being denied. When he tried to buy food at an automated kiosk, his payment was rejected. The screen flashed a message. Account under investigation pending conquered review. David stared at the boxes containing his life and wondered what he was supposed to do now. Ashkara had promised loyalty and protection, but the dragon had disappeared after the confrontation with Ambassador Lissa. David understood. Ashkara probably had its own problems to deal with. Ancient dragons did not solve human problems like homelessness and hunger. His stomach growled. David ignored it. He was getting good at ignoring hunger. A shadow fell across the bench. David looked up, expecting another person come to tell him to leave. Instead, he saw Ashkara standing there in the park, massive and impossible to miss. People were screaming and running, scattering like startled birds. Park security was shouting into communicators, and somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. You left, David said. He meant to sound angry, but mostly he just sounded tired. Ashkara settled on the grass beside the bench, completely unbothered by the chaos its presence was causing. I was searching for others like me. There are more dragons cursed by the Concord, scattered across the galaxy. Your kindness has created ripples, David. Some of them are beginning to awaken. That's great, David said flatly. I'm glad someone's situation is improving. Ashkara's golden eyes focused on him, seeing too much. You lost your home, and my job prospects, and my credit rating, and my ability to buy food. David laughed, but it came out bitter. Turns out defying the conquered has consequences. Who knew? I knew, Ashkara said quietly. I knew what would happen to you, and I allowed it anyway. I named you Flame Brother and made you a target. The fault is mine. David looked at the dragon, seeing genuine guilt in those ancient eyes. I made my own choice. I stepped between you and those guards because it was the right thing to do. Just like feeding you was the right thing to do. I don't regret it. But you wish you had not done it, Ashkara said, reading the truth in David's face. David was quiet for a long moment. Around them, security vehicles were arriving, and officers were setting up a perimeter. They were not approaching yet, probably calling for backup or waiting for orders. Nobody wanted to be the first to confront an angry dragon. I'm hungry again, David said finally. I'm homeless again. I'm unemployed again. I'm exactly where I started, except now everyone knows my face and nobody will help me. So yeah, part of me wishes I had just walked past that alley. Part of me wishes I had never seen you dying there. Ashkara lowered its head, scales dimming slightly. I can leave. I can renounce the bond. It would take time, but eventually the conquered would forget about you. You could rebuild your life, and could I? David asked. My face is on every newsfeed in the city. The Concord has flagged my ID. Even if you left right now, I don't think things would just go back to normal. Perhaps not, Ashkara admitted. But they would improve. Without me, you are no threat to anyone. You would become unimportant again. Invisible. David thought about that. About being unimportant. About being invisible. About all those nights in the alley when people walked past him without seeing him, without caring. About being so insignificant that nobody even bothered to notice he was starving. You were dying in an alley, David said slowly. Nobody cared. Nobody stopped. I don't know how long you were there, but I'm guessing it was more than one night. How many people walked past you, Ashkara? How many just kept going? Many, Ashkara said. Hundreds, perhaps thousands over the years. The curse made me appear insignificant, forgettable. Something to be stepped over and ignored. I stopped, David said. Not because I'm special or brave or heroic. I stopped because I saw someone suffering and I couldn't walk past that. Even when it cost me my last meal. Even when it cost me everything I had. And you know what? That matters. That means something. Ashkara raised its head, golden eyes blazing. It means everything. So no, David said firmly. You don't get to leave. You don't get to renounce the bond to make things easier for me. I fed you because you were dying and nobody else cared. That hasn't changed just because things got complicated. You don't abandon people when things get hard. That's not how friendship works. For a long moment, Ashkara just stared at him. Then the dragon made a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been something else entirely. You are defending me again. Even now, when I am offering you an escape, you are defending me. That's what flame brothers do, right? David said. You told me. My struggles are yours and yours are mine. That goes both ways. Ashkara spread its wings suddenly, the massive span blocking out the sun and casting the entire park in shadow. The security officers shouted and raised their weapons, but the dragon ignored them. It looked down at David with something that might have been respect or might have been affection. The Concord imprisoned me for 3,000 years because I chose freedom over servitude, Ashkara said. I endured the curse because I believed there were things worth suffering for, principles worth defending. But I had begun to doubt David. After so long, I had begun to wonder if I had been a fool, if perhaps surrender would have been wiser. And now? David asked. Now I know I was right, Ashkara said. You have reminded me that some things are worth any cost. Loyalty, compassion, standing with those who need you, even when it would be easier to walk away. These things matter, David Reed. They matter more than comfort or safety or survival. A new vehicle arrived at the park's edge. David recognized the sleek design. Concord official transport. Ambassador Lissa stepped out, her silver eyes finding David immediately across the crowded park. She walked toward them, alone this time, without guards. When she reached the bench, she looked at David for a long moment. The Concord Council has issued an ultimatum, Lissa said. You have 24 hours to renounce your bond with Ashkara. If you do so publicly, all charges against you will be dropped. Your accounts will be restored. Your ID will be cleared. You will be compensated for your troubles and relocated to a new city where nobody knows your face. And if I don't? David asked. Then you will be charged with conspiracy against galactic peace, harboring a fugitive sovereign and inciting rebellion. The sentence is life imprisonment in a Concord facility. No trial, no appeal. You will disappear, David Reed, and nobody will ever find you. David looked at Ashkara. The dragon gazed back at him, golden eyes unreadable, waiting for his decision, ready to accept whatever David chose. 24 hours to decide. 24 hours to choose between a fresh start and a lifetime in prison. Between safety and loyalty. Between the easy path and the right one. David thought about his grandmother at his grandfather's funeral, speaking about the measure of a person. He thought about walking past a dying dragon in an alley and choosing to stop. He thought about all the ways that simple choice had already changed his life. He looked at Ambassador Lissa and smiled, though it felt shaky. I'll need those 24 hours. This is kind of a big decision. Lissa nodded slowly. I expected that. Use the time wisely, David Reed. Think very carefully about what you are risking. She walked back to her transport, leaving David and Ashkara alone in the park. Security had cleared a wide perimeter around them now, keeping everyone back. David and the dragon sat together in the empty space, surrounded by watching eyes and weapons and consequences. What will you choose? Ashkara asked quietly. David looked at his 3 boxes of belongings. Everything he owned. Everything he had left. It was not much, but it was something. He could walk away right now. He could choose himself over loyalty. Nobody would blame him except he would know. He would know he had abandoned a friend when things got difficult. He would know he had chosen the easy path over the right one, and David Reed would have to live with that knowledge for the rest of his life. I already know what I'm going to choose, David said. I just need 24 hours to figure out how to be brave enough to do it. Ashkara's wing lowered, creating a canopy of scales above David's head, warm and protective and loyal. You are already brave enough, the dragon said. You have always been brave enough. Now you simply need to believe it. 23 hours later, David stood outside the spaceport and watched conquered warships cut through the clouds like knives through paper, 3 of them massive and dark against the evening sky. They settled into low orbit above New Harbor, close enough that David could see their weapons arrays tracking targets below. They were here for him. For one homeless human who had fed a starving dragon in an alley. Ashkara stood beside him, scales gleaming in the dying light. The dragon had not left David's side since the ultimatum. They had spent the night in the park, then the day walking through the city while people stared and whispered. David's 24 hours were almost up. You can still choose safety, Ashkara said. The dragon had said it a dozen times over the past day, and each time David heard the hope underneath the words. Hope that David would choose to save himself. David pulled his thin jacket tighter against the wind. He owned even less now than he had yesterday. The 3 boxes of belongings had been stolen while he slept in the park. Everything was gone except the clothes on his back and the dragon standing next to him. I talked to my mother last night, David said. Called her from a public terminal. First time in 2 years. I couldn't afford the long-distance rates before, and I was too ashamed to tell her how badly my life had fallen apart. What did she say? Ashkara asked. She said she's proud of me. David's voice cracked slightly. I told her everything. About losing my job, about being homeless, about feeding you, about the ultimatum. And you know what she said? She said she's proud of me for doing the right thing even when it was hard. A transport horn blared somewhere in the distance. Above them, one of the warships powered up its engines, the sound like thunder rolling across the sky. Then she cried. David continued. Because she knows what I'm about to do and she knows what it's going to cost me. But she's still proud. That's all I really wanted, I think. To make her proud one more time before everything goes bad. Ashkara's golden eyes blazed with emotion. David, I'm not renouncing the bond, David said firmly. So you can stop hoping I will. I fed you because it was right. I defended you because it was right. And I'm going to stand by you now because it's right. That's all there is to it. Before Ashkara could respond, a new voice cut through the evening air. Touching. Stupid, but touching. David turned to see a human man approaching from the spaceport entrance. He was old, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face worn by hard years. He wore a cargo pilot's jacket, stained and patched, but clearly well-loved. Name's Rourke, the man said, stopping a few feet away. I fly cargo runs, legal and otherwise, and I've been listening to your story on the feeds. You're about to get yourself arrested for helping a friend, yeah? David nodded slowly. That's the plan. Not much of one, but it's what I've got. Rourke grunted. Terrible plan. Concord prisons are black holes. People go in, they don't come out. You'll rot in a cell somewhere, and nobody will even remember your name in a year. Probably, David agreed. But at least I'll know I stood by my principles. That counts for something. It counts for dying alone in the dark, Rourke said bluntly. But here's the thing, kid. I don't like the Conquered. Haven't liked them since they steamrolled through the outer colonies and killed my brother for refusing to give up his land. So I'm going to offer you a different option." He gestured back toward the spaceport. "I've got a ship. Fast one, with some illegal modifications that the authorities haven't caught yet. I can get you off this planet. Both of you." Before the Conquered closes the net, David stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "You don't know me." "No, but I know what you did. You fed someone who was dying when you were starving yourself. That's the kind of person we need more of in this galaxy, not fewer." Rourke spat on the ground. "Besides, watching you stick it to the Concorde would make my brother smile, wherever he is now." Ashkara stepped forward, studying Rourke with intense focus. "You understand this will make you an enemy of the Conquered as well. They will hunt you for helping us," Rourke shrugged. "They're already hunting me for about 6 different smuggling violations. What's one more charge?" David looked at Ashkara, then back at Rourke. His heart was pounding. This was real. This was actually happening. He could run. He could escape. He did not have to surrender to prison and darkness and disappearing. "Where would we go?" David asked. Rourke pulled out a datapad and showed them a string of coordinates. "Got a message this morning. Anonymous source, but it checked out. These coordinates lead to an old space station in the Kellen Nebula. Message said, 'Those who remember kindness gather at the old place.' Mean anything to you?" Ashkara went very still. "The Sanctuary Network," the dragon breathed. "I thought it was destroyed when the Conquered rose to power. If it still exists, then there might be others," David finished. "Other dragons. Other people who oppose the Conquered. Could be a trap," Rourke warned. "Could be Conquered intelligence trying to flush out rebels. Could be nothing at all. But it's better than prison and it's better than surrender." David looked up at the warships circling overhead. Ambassador Lissa would be waiting for his answer. The Conquered would be preparing to arrest him the moment his 24 hours expired. He had maybe 15 minutes left before they came for him. "What about your ship's crew?" David asked. "Will they be okay with this?" "Got a small team," Rourke said. "Stella flies, Omar keeps the engines running, and Doc Lynn handles medical. They're all people who've been burned by the Conquered one way or another. They'll understand." David took a deep breath. Running felt like cowardice. But was it really cowardice if he was running towards something instead of away from it? If he was choosing to fight rather than surrender? "Okay," David said. "Let's go." They ran for the spaceport, Rourke leading the way through side passages and service corridors that bypassed the main security checkpoints. David's heart hammered in his chest, expecting alarms to sound at any moment, expecting Conquered guards to appear and drag him away. Instead, they made it to the private docks where independent cargo ships were parked. Rourke's vessel was old but sturdy, with the blocky hull of a ship built for hauling freight rather than looking pretty. The name Defiant Star was painted on the side in fading letters. "Subtle," Ashkara commented. "I named her after my brother," Rourke said. "He was defiant till the end. Figured the ship should carry that forward." They boarded quickly. David met the crew in rapid succession. Stella was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and quick hands on the controls. Omar was younger, barely 30, with the oil-stained fingers of someone who lived in the engine room. Doc Lynn was elderly and quiet, watching David with the careful assessment of someone who had seen too much suffering. "Strap in," Stella called from the cockpit. "Conquered ships are going to notice us the second we leave atmosphere. This is going to get rough." David buckled himself into a passenger seat, Ashkara settling beside him in a space barely large enough for the dragon's bulk. Rourke dropped into the co-pilot seat and the ship's engines roared to life. "Defiant Star, you are not cleared for departure." A voice crackled over the communications system. "Power down immediately and await inspection." "Yeah, that's not going to happen," Stella muttered. She pushed the throttle forward and the ship leaped into the sky. Alarms shrieked. Conquered ships changed their orbit, weapon systems lighting up. David gripped his armrests as the ship shook and rattled, climbing through the atmosphere at speeds that probably violated several safety regulations. "Incoming fire," Omar announced from the engine room. "Shields holding." Energy beams lanced past the viewports close enough that David could see the air ionizing around them. The ship jinked left, then right, Stella flying with the kind of reckless skill that came from too many years dodging authorities. "Jump coordinates locked," Rourke said. 30 seconds to jump point. Those 30 seconds felt like hours. More weapons fire, more shaking, more alarms. David closed his eyes and thought about his mother's voice on the phone. Proud of him. No matter what happened next, she was proud of him. The ship lurched, reality twisted, and everything went silent. When David opened his eyes, the viewports showed nothing but swirling purple and blue clouds. The Kellen Nebula. They had made it. Everyone alive back there? Stella called. Alive, David confirmed. Beside him, Ashkara's eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Good, Stella said, because according to these sensors, we're not alone out here. Something big is waiting at those coordinates. Multiple somethings. Really hoping they're friendly. Rourke brought up the sensor display. David leaned forward, squinting at the shapes that were resolving out of the nebula's interference. Large shapes. Dragon-sized shapes. The sanctuary, Ashkara whispered. It survived. After all these years, it survived. The ship moved deeper into the nebula, following the coordinates toward whatever was waiting there. David had made his choice. He had run instead of surrendering. He had chosen loyalty over safety, freedom over security. Now he was about to discover what that choice would cost him and what it might gain him. Behind them, light years away, Ambassador Lisa stood in her office and watched the reports come in. David Reed had fled. The Concorde's ultimatum had failed. The human had chosen the dragon over civilization. Lisa closed her eyes and remembered watching David share his last meal in that alley. She remembered his answer when she asked why he helped. You were hungry. I had food. What else would I do? For the first time in her long career, Lisa wondered if the Concorde had made a terrible mistake. Not in trying to stop David Reed, but in forgetting that compassion like his might be worth more than all their warships combined. The space station appeared through the nebula, like a ghost materializing from fog. It was massive, ancient, built from materials that did not match anything in modern galactic databases. The architecture was wrong too, flowing and organic rather than geometric. This place had been built by dragons for dragons long before the Concorde existed. David stepped off the Defiant Star and felt his breath catch. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 50 ships the size of Rourke's, but it was mostly empty. Only a handful of small vessels sat scattered across the bay floor, looking lost in all that space. What filled the space instead were dragons, 7 of them, each as large as Ashkara, each magnificent in their own way. Their scales ranged from deep midnight blue to brilliant silver to burning orange. They turned to watch as Ashkara emerged from the ship, and the air suddenly felt heavy with power and ancient recognition. Sovereigns, Ashkara breathed. 7 sovereigns. I thought I was the last. One of the dragons stepped forward, moving with the careful dignity of extreme age. Its scales were pale gray, almost white, and its eyes were the color of old smoke. When it spoke, its voice echoed through the bay like distant thunder. Ashkara of the Western Reaches, we felt your awakening. We felt the curse break. After 3,000 years, we felt hope again. The ancient dragon's gaze shifted to David, studying him with uncomfortable intensity. This is the human. This is David Reed, Ashkara confirmed. My flame brother, the one who freed me. David stood there, suddenly aware that 7 ancient dragons were staring at him. He felt small and young and completely out of his depth. These were beings who had lived for thousands of years, who had power beyond his understanding. What was he supposed to say to them? Hello, David managed. It came out as barely a whisper. The pale dragon tilted its head, and something that might have been amusement flickered in those smoke-colored eyes. Ashkara tells the truth. This is no warrior, no politician, no one of importance. The dragon paused. He is merely kind. Another dragon, this one with scales like polished copper, moved closer. How did you break the curse, human? What power do you possess? None, David said honestly. I just gave Ashkara my last meal. That's all. I was hungry and Ashkara was dying and I had food. So I shared it. The dragons looked at each other. Something passed between them. Some silent communication that David could not follow. Finally, the pale dragon spoke again. I am Cinder, eldest of the remaining sovereigns. I have lived for 6,000 years, human. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have watched galaxies turn and stars die. And in all that time, I have never seen a curse broken by kindness alone. The curse was designed by the Concorde's best minds, another dragon added. This one had scales like dark emeralds shimmering with inner light. It required an act of pure compassion, selfless, with no thought of reward or recognition. We believed such acts were impossible in the modern galaxy. We believed the conquered had bred compassion out of civilized species. I'm not civilized, David said, then felt his face heat. I mean, I'm human. We're new to the galactic community. We still do things the old way, I guess. Cinder's eyes blazed suddenly bright. The old way. Yes, before the Concord standardized everything. Before they decided that efficiency mattered more than connection. Before they made the galaxy cold. David's people are called Deathworlders, Ashkara explained. They evolved on a planet that tried to kill them constantly. They learned to survive through cooperation and mutual protection, through caring for their pack even at cost to themselves. Interesting, the Copper Dragon murmured, a species that survived by being kind. The conquered must hate that. They do, Rourke spoke up from the ship's ramp. The crew had emerged behind him, watching the gathering with wide eyes. The conquered has been trying to civilize humanity for 2 centuries, trying to make us more like them. Cold, efficient, selfish. It's not working very well, Stella added. Humans keep doing stupid things like helping strangers and standing up for principles. Cinder turned its attention to the ship's crew, and David saw something shift in the ancient dragon's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. You are all rebels. All people who chose compassion over compliance. That is why you helped David. We helped David because the conquered killed people we loved, Omar said quietly. Because the conquered takes and takes and takes and never gives back. Because someone needs to stand up and say no. The dragons were quiet for a long moment. David could feel the weight of their attention, their assessment. These beings had been cursed and imprisoned for 3,000 years because they refused to serve the Concord. Now they had awakened and they had to decide what came next. The Concord will come for us, the Emerald Dragon said. They know about this place now. David's ship was tracked. Within days, perhaps hours, they will send a fleet to destroy us. Let them come, a red-scaled dragon growled. We are sovereigns. We do not fear their ships, but we should fear their goals, Cinder corrected gently. They do not want to kill us. They want to curse us again, to trap us in dormancy until we are broken enough to serve, or until we die slowly, forgotten in alleys while the galaxy walks past without caring. David flinched at that description. That was exactly where he had found Ashkara. Forgotten and dying while people walked past, so what do we do? Ashkara asked. We cannot hide forever. We cannot run forever. Eventually the conquered will find us and force a confrontation. Then we give them what they want, Cinder said. A confrontation, but on our terms, with a message they cannot ignore. The other dragons stirred, wings rustling, scales shimmering with suppressed power. David felt the air grow warmer as their emotions kindled. You want war, David said quietly. You want revenge for what they did to you. Cinder looked at him, and David saw something in those ancient eyes that made his chest ache. Not anger, something sadder. I want justice, David Reed, for myself, for my kin, for all the beings the Concord has crushed in their pursuit of order. But I do not know how to achieve justice without violence. I have lived too long in darkness to remember another way. David thought about that. About 3,000 years trapped in a curse, slowly dying, reduced to nothing while the galaxy forgot you existed. About the bitterness and anger that would create. About how hard it would be to choose compassion after experiencing that much suffering. Ashkara chose compassion, David said. When I came back to check on you the next morning, you could have killed me. Could have taken your anger out on the first being who came close, but you didn't. You thanked me instead. Ashkara's scales brightened. Because you reminded me what compassion looked like. You showed me there was still kindness in the universe. Then maybe that's your message, David suggested. Not violence. Not revenge. Just showing the galaxy that compassion still matters. That it's stronger than the Conquered's curses and rules and fear. The dragons looked at each other again. Cinder was quiet for a long moment, smoke-colored eyes distant and thoughtful. The human makes a compelling point, Cinder said finally. We could rain fire on conquered worlds. We could tear down their government and rule through fear as they once ruled us. But that would make us no different from them. It would prove that the curse had worked, that we were reduced to weapons after all. So what do we do instead? The Copper Dragon asked. We offer the conquered a choice, Ashkara said, stepping forward. Peace with honor or war with consequences. We show them what David showed me. That compassion is not weakness. That cooperation is possible. That there is another way forward. And if they refuse, the Emerald Dragon demanded, If they choose war, then we defend ourselves, Cinder said. But we defend others too. We become what we should have been all along. Protectors, not weapons. Not servants. Protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. A new voice cut through the bay, amplified and cold. How noble. How utterly pointless. Everyone turned. On the bay's main display screen, Ambassador Lissa's face appeared, larger than life. Behind her, visible through the station's external sensors, a fleet of conquered warships emerged from the nebula. Dozens of them surrounding the station in a sphere of metal and weapons. Sovereigns of the old order, Lissa said formally. By the authority of the conquered of eternal stars, you are commanded to surrender immediately. You will be placed in secure containment pending evaluation. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Cinder looked at the fleet, then at David, then back at Lissa's image. And if we choose to defend ourselves? Then you prove you are still dangerous weapons, Lissa replied. And we will be justified in destroying you. David stepped forward before he could stop himself. Wait, just wait a second. You're giving them the same ultimatum you gave me. Surrender or be destroyed. Choice that isn't really a choice. Lisa's silver eyes found him on the screen. David Reed, you were offered mercy. You chose rebellion. Now you will face the consequences. What consequences? David asked. Prison? Death? Disappearing into your system and being forgotten? That's what you do to everyone who disagrees with you, isn't it? You crush them. You curse them. You make them disappear until nobody remembers they existed. Something flickered across Lisa's face. That is how civilizations survive, human. Through order. Through hierarchy. Through removing those who threaten stability. Through fear, David corrected. You rule through fear. And you're terrified of the sovereigns because they're powerful enough to say no to you. But here's the thing. I'm not powerful. I'm nobody. And I said no to you too. What does that mean for your perfect system? Lissa was quiet. Behind her, David could see other conquered officials appearing, murmuring to each other, gesturing at screens. The conversation was being broadcast. People across the conquered were listening. It means you are a fool, Lissa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe, David agreed. But I'm a fool who fed a starving stranger. I'm a fool who stood by a friend. I'm a fool who chose compassion over safety. And you know what? I'd rather be that kind of fool than the kind of person who walks past suffering because it's convenient. The dragon stirred behind him. Cinder moved to stand beside David, the ancient dragon's presence like a wall of power at his back. The human speaks truth, Cinder said. We offer you a choice, Ambassador. Not surrender, a choice. Stand down your fleet, meet with us, discuss a new way forward. Or fire your weapons and prove that the conquered's only answer is violence. Lissa stared at them through the screen. Her expression was unreadable, but David thought he saw something in her eyes. Doubt maybe, or weariness. You have 1 hour, Lissa said finally. I will meet with you, but if I sense any treachery, any attempt to harm me, this fleet will reduce your station to dust. The screen went dark. The dragons and humans looked at each other in the sudden silence. That went better than expected, Rourke said. David's legs were shaking. He had just confronted a conquered ambassador in front of an entire fleet. He had challenged an entire system of government with nothing but words and principles. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever done. Ashkara's wing lowered around him, warm and protective. You continue to amaze me, Flame Brother. I'm just trying not to get us all killed, David muttered. Cinder laughed, the sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. Then you are succeeding admirably. Now comes the truly difficult part. We must convince Ambassador Lissa that compassion is not weakness, that there is another way forward. Can you do that, David Reed? David looked at the fleet surrounding them, at the weapons pointed at the station, at the dragon standing ready to fight or die, at the crew of the Defiant Star, who had risked everything to help a stranger. I can try, David said. That's all any of us can do, right? Just try to be better than we were yesterday. Cinder's smoke-colored eyes blazed with something that looked like hope. Then let us try together. Ambassador Lissa materialized in the station's council chamber, her form flickering slightly from the transport beam. She came alone as promised, though David knew the fleet outside could vaporize the station with a single command from her. Behind him stood the 7 sovereigns, ancient and powerful, their scales glowing with suppressed energy. Beside him stood Ashkara, his flame brother, ready to defend him to the death if needed. David stood in the middle, feeling completely out of place. He was a cargo loader who had lost his job. A homeless man who had shared his last meal with a stranger. Nothing about him was special or important or qualified to negotiate galactic peace. But Cinder had asked him to speak. The sovereigns believed his words carried weight. So David would speak even though his voice shook and his hands trembled. Lissa looked at him with those silver eyes, and David saw exhaustion there. Deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went beyond mere physical tiredness. "Say what you came to say, David Reed," Lissa said quietly. "You have your hour. Use it wisely." David took a breath. He had thought about what to say during the wait. He had planned speeches and arguments and logical points. But standing here now, face to face with the woman who represented everything the Conquered stood for, all those plans felt hollow. So David told the truth instead. "I was hungry," he said. 3 weeks without a job, down to my last few credits. I was walking to buy one meal, knowing it might be my last for days. And I found Ashkara dying in an alley behind a dumpster, barely breathing, scales cracked, eyes closed. Lisa listened without expression, but something flickered in her gaze. Attention, perhaps, or recognition. "I stood there looking at this dying dragon, and I thought about walking away," David continued. "I thought about all the reasons I should keep going. I needed that food. I had my own survival to worry about. It wasn't my problem. Nobody would blame me for putting myself first." "But you didn't," Lisa said. "It wasn't a question." "No," David agreed. "I didn't. Because I looked at Ashkara and I saw someone suffering. And I had the power to help. Not much power. Just one meal. But it was something. And I couldn't walk past that. I couldn't live with myself if I did." "So you fed a dragon," Lissa said, "and broke a curse designed by our greatest minds, and started a chain of events that threatens the entire Concord power structure, all because you couldn't walk past suffering." "Yes," David said simply. Lissa was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, carrying less authority and more genuine curiosity. "Why? What made you different from all the others who walked past? What made you stop when thousands of others didn't?" David thought about that question, about all the nights he had spent cold and hungry and alone, about the people who had walked past him without seeing, about how invisible suffering could be when people chose not to look. "My grandmother," David said. "She raised me after my parents died. She didn't have much. We were poor. Sometimes we went hungry, but she always said that being poor wasn't an excuse to be cruel. That having nothing made it even more important to share what little you had, because you understood what suffering felt like." He looked at Lisa, seeing her really see him for the first time, not as a threat or a rebel or a symbol, just as a person. A human being with a history and a heart and a choice he had made. "I've been where Ashkara was," David said quietly, "not cursed for 3,000 years, but forgotten, invisible, suffering while people walked past without caring. I know what that feels like, and I couldn't do that to someone else, even if it cost me everything, even if it made my life harder. I couldn't be the person who walks past suffering because it's convenient." Lisa closed her eyes. When she opened them again, David saw something he had never expected. Tears, silver and bright against her blue-green skin. "I had a sister," Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly, "long ago before I joined the Conquered Diplomatic Corps. We grew up on a poor colony world. We had nothing, but we had each other." The dragons behind David stirred, listening. Cinder moved forward slightly, drawn by the shift in Lissa's tone. "There was a famine," Lissa continued. "Relief supplies were delayed. People were dying. My sister and I had one ration pack left between us, enough for one person to survive until help arrived. Not enough for two." David's chest tightened. He could see where this story was going. "She gave it to me," Lisa whispered. "She said I was stronger, said I would survive and make something of my life. She gave me her chance and took nothing for herself." Tears tracked down Lissa's face now, unchecked. "I survived. She didn't. And I joined the Conquered and climbed their ranks and learned to be hard and cold and efficient. I learned to walk past suffering because that's what survivors do. That's what strong people do." "No," David said gently. "That's what broken people do. People who've been hurt so badly they can't remember how to care anymore." Lisa flinched like he had struck her. "Your sister gave you compassion," David continued. "She showed you what love looked like. And instead of honoring that, you spent your life suppressing it. You made yourself into everything she wasn't, everything she didn't want you to become." "I had to," Lissa said desperately. To survive in the Conquered, you have to be hard. You have to put yourself first. You have to forget who you were. Cinder interrupted, his ancient voice gentle. You have to become the thing that hurt you. That is the Concord's true curse, Ambassador, not the magic they used on us. The curse of teaching beings to abandon compassion in the name of survival. Lissa looked at the ancient dragon, then back at David. How do you live with it? She asked. How do you stay kind when the universe punishes you for it? You lost everything for feeding a stranger. Your home, your job, your safety. How do you not regret it? David thought about his 3 boxes of belongings stolen from the park, about sleeping in alleys and going hungry, about all the ways his kindness had cost him. I think about my grandmother, David said, and I think about Ashkara thanking me for a meal, and I think about my mother saying she's proud of me, and I realize that losing things isn't the same as losing yourself. I still know who I am. I still know what matters. That's worth more than any job or home or safety. Your sister knew that too, Cinder said to Lissa. She knew that love mattered more than survival. That connection mattered more than individual success. That caring for others was worth any sacrifice. Lissa stood there in the council chamber, surrounded by dragons and facing a human who had somehow become the center of a galactic crisis. David could see her struggling, torn between the person she had been and the person she had become. If I stand down the fleet, Lissa said slowly, if I report back to the Conquered Council that the sovereigns are not a threat, they will remove me from office. They may imprison me. They may curse me as they cursed you, Cinder. Yes, Cinder agreed. They might. That is the price of choosing compassion in a system built on fear. But you won't be alone, David added. The sovereigns will protect you. I'll stand with you. Others will too. We're not powerful by Conquered standards, but we're enough. We're enough to start something new. Lissa looked at him for a long moment. David saw her weighing everything. Her career, her safety, her life. Against what? Against a memory of a sister who gave her last meal. Against a human who did the same for a stranger. Against the possibility that compassion might be stronger than fear after all. I'm tired, Lissa said finally. I'm so tired of being hard. Of suppressing every kind impulse. Of walking past suffering because acknowledging it makes me weak. She looked at the sovereigns. If you protect me, if you build sanctuaries for those fleeing the Conquered's cruelty, I will tell the truth. I will tell the galaxy what I saw. A human sharing his last meal. A dragon choosing gratitude over vengeance. A different way forward. And the fleet? Ashkara asked. Lissa pulled out her communication device. Fleet Command, this is Ambassador Lissa. Stand down all weapons. Withdraw to the nebula's edge and await further orders. She paused, then added, I am resigning my position as Conquered Ambassador, effective immediately. My reason is simple. I watched a human give his last meal to a dying stranger, and I realized he had more honor than our entire civilization. She broadcast the message on all frequencies, letting it spread across Concord space. Then she broke the communication device in half and dropped it on the floor. There, she said. I've chosen. Now what? David smiled, feeling something warm spread through his chest. Hope, maybe, or relief. Now we show the galaxy that compassion isn't weakness. That connection matters, that there's another way to live besides fear and hierarchy. Ambitious, Lissa said, but she was almost smiling. How do you plan to accomplish that? One meal at a time, David said. One person at a time. One choice at a time. We just keep choosing kindness until it starts to spread. Cinder laughed, the sound like distant thunder. The human is wise beyond his years. We shall try his method. Build sanctuaries. Protect refugees. Show the galaxy what cooperation looks like. Over the following months, word spread across the stars. The sovereigns had returned, but not as weapons. As protectors. They established refugees where any being fleeing the Conquered's cruelty could find shelter. They defended the defenseless. They remembered what David had shown them. That power was meant for protecting, not dominating. Lissa became their bridge to the wider galaxy, speaking truth about the Conquered's failures and the Sovereign's purpose. Other beings joined them. Humans mostly, but other species too. People who were tired of fear, who remembered what compassion felt like. The Conquered tried to stop them. But you cannot stop an idea whose time has come. You cannot curse away hope once people remember it exists. David returned to New Harbor 6 months later. The city had changed. It had become a hub for the new movement, a place where species cooperated instead of competed, where compassion was valued over efficiency, where no one was invisible or forgotten. David walked through the market district, no longer homeless or hungry. The sovereigns had offered him wealth and status, but he had refused. Instead, he worked at a refugee center, helping newly arrived beings find their footing in this changed world. He passed a young alien child, small and thin and clearly hungry. Without hesitation, David stopped at a food vendor and bought a meal. He knelt down and offered it to the child, who took it with wide, grateful eyes. Behind him, Ashkara watched in humanoid form, scales shimmering beneath a simple cloak. The dragon smiled, seeing David do what he had always done. What he would always do, choosing compassion, seeing suffering and stopping to help, being the person who doesn't walk past even when it costs something. That night, David recorded a message for the historical archives, knowing future generations would ask how everything changed, how the conquered's grip loosened, how the galaxy remembered what kindness meant. People ask me if I knew what would happen when I shared that meal, David said to the recorder. I didn't. I just knew someone was hungry and I had food. That's all it ever needs to be. Compassion isn't complicated. We just make it that way. He paused, looking out the window at the transformed city, at the multiple species working together, at the future they were building, one kind choice at a time. My grandmother told me to measure a person by what they do when nobody's watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, just a choice between helping and walking past. David smiled. I hope I measured up. I hope we all do. The recording ended, but the story didn't. It spread across worlds, across species, across the galaxy. The story of a homeless human who fed a dying dragon and reminded the universe that compassion was stronger than any curse. And in alleys and streets and forgotten corners across 1,000 worlds, people stopped walking past suffering. They stopped. They helped. They chose kindness, because one person had shown them it was possible, had shown them it mattered, had shown them that everything could change with one shared meal and one moment of compassion. That was enough to start a revolution. That was enough to change everything.